Hi, I'm Rachel with Patterns and Pixels Canada, and on today's video I'll be working on week 4 of my Winter Mystery Quilt. Let's get started. This week I'm starting my Winter Mystery Quilt for week 4. I have already completed 2 different types of blocks from week 1, which was this one, and this one. Then in week 2 we just worked on different strip sets. So I have a stack here that I'm assuming will be cut into something later on. And then last week in week 3, I created combination half square triangles, which was the first time I'd done that. I will include links to all of these in the description below. But let's find out what week 4 is going to be. More fabric, and I think a spool of thread. Yep. Okay, so we have medium blue, and then 2 different widths of the light blue, and one of the white, and then Aman group. Ooh, silk finish. It's a lovely shade. It says old color 0790. That does look quite nice. Now, I took a look at what the instructions were for this week. It looks like I'm making flying geese. And for those of you watching this video who are experienced quilters, you're thinking, well, that's fine, easy peasy. I am not an experienced quilter, and I have never made flying geese before, and I don't have any of the special rulers. So I will be doing my best with the resources I have available. The pictures they show of how to make each of these look complicated, so I'm a little worried. I'm going to ignore those for now, and I'm just going to go to the section that tells me how I'm meant to cut up all of my fabric. And I'm going to focus on that. You know, how do you eat a whale 1 bite at a time? I'm going to do the bite I know how to do first. I'm going to cut fabric. Once I've gotten to that point, I will then follow the rest of the instructions on how to make this block with flying geese. Let's get started. cut all of my fabric the way the instructions have asked for. I didn't have enough of the white to cut all the 20 blocks I needed. I think I only had enough to do 17, but I went back into the package to week 2 and found some of my spare fabric and used that instead. So this is what I'm left with. These pieces are extra, which I might need in a different week. Now I'm following the computer, the instructions they've emailed to us for the flying geese. I've already gone through and drawn diagonal lines on the back of all of my white squares with the clicker pen that they gave to us earlier on in the Mystery Quilt project. Normally I wouldn't draw lines. I would be very lazy and just kind of eyeball it and put it through the sewing machine. I do have tape on my sewing machine to help me see where the 1/4 inch seam is, but because these are such small pieces and because I've never made flying geese before, I thought I would take the time to actually draw the lines on the back of all of my squares. The first set of instructions says to use the larger medium blue squares that I cut, and then to do a scant 1/4 inch seam on either side of this line that I've drawn, going across both of these squares. That I think I can manage. So I'm going to do that job first. They then want you to press it out before putting the other squares going the other way, like that. So I'm going to go through and just do this on all of the larger squares. Press the seams open and then see if it looks like the picture when I'm done. Fingers crossed. It worked. I now have a bunch of foxes. So far so good. It looks like the picture. So I figured I'm off to I'm off to the races, everything's working. I'm now supposed to take the rest of my white squares and go the other way. This stitch, still with the scant 1/4 inch on both sides. And then I guess when I open it, that's when I get my sort of flying geese rectangular shape. Wasn't too bad, actually. I enjoyed it. I enjoy learning something new that I can now apply to other situations. And when I go to my quilting guild and the other quilters are talking about things like flying geese, I now know what they are because I've made them. All right, next step is I've got 10 of these. So I'm going to go through and stitch this onto each of them, cut them, press them, and then I will end up with 20. And then it looks like after I've done that, it's just a matter of taking these blocks and the light blue and assembling block 3 following the picture that they've given me. So this one's kind of come together fairly quickly, actually, which works for me. This is all my flying geese finished and ready to go. I've already pressed them, I have already trimmed them, and I have to say I'm in love. For any of you that have been following my videos, you know that I'm also working on a quilt, Reach for the Stars. And if you haven't seen that, I'll link it below. That quilt pattern is old, and the designer had us cutting out triangles and sewing them to other triangles to make the flying geese square or rectangle. And the pattern didn't allow for squaring up afterwards. And so I found that often, no matter how careful I was with my cutting, by the time I cut 3 different triangles and sewn them together, I wasn't quite at the right size for each of my units. And then when I stitched them together to make the block wasn't the right size. With this pattern, sewing squares to squares and then trimming them, and then once I had them made, they were larger than I needed, so I then had to square them down to the size I needed, which means that each of these flying geese is exactly the size it needs to be before I stitch it to my other squares, which just makes sense. It was so easy. And I don't even have the special rulers that you're supposed to use for making flying geese. I can only imagine how much easier it would have been if I had those. So I'm very pleased with how well this turned out, especially because at the beginning of this process, when I was looking at the picture on the plan, I thought, oh, that looks complicated. But it wasn't, not once you got started. I did make a point of putting some masking tape on my ruler again, like I did last week, to help me with squaring up each of my flying geese, making sure that my points landed where I wanted them to. But it was simple, easy process. The only thing I need to do now is put these together to make the blocks. So it looks like I will be making 4. I'm just pausing for a second. Oh no, sorry, I'm making 5 because I'm using 4 of the, right. I'm making 5 blocks, big one in the middle. Then the flying geese go around each of the sides, like so, and then these small little guys into the corners. And then that is the block for this week. And so the way I'll do this is I'll stitch that as one row, that is one row, and that is one row, and then come along and do the other sides until I have all 5 of them made. Here you see all of my pieces made for the 5 blocks that I'm working on. The next step is going to be stitching them together like this. But before I did that, I wanted to show you how I had decided to iron all of my sections. So I chose the centerpiece first. These ones I've ironed the seams all going towards the center. And I made that choice for 2 reasons. The first, the fabric just naturally wants to lie that way anyway. So rather than me trying to force it back and then ending up with quite a bump of fabric in the corners, I just let it fall the way it wanted to. But the second reason why I chose to do that is so that I can end up nesting it against these pieces, because these ones with that center flying geese naturally want to fold going the opposite direction. They want to lie the other way. So again, I let them do that rather than forcing them to go back on themselves. That means that when I come to stitch my 2 edges together, I can nest my seams, which means I've got that one going towards the right, this one is coming towards the left, and when I put them beside each other, I can actually feel with my fingers where the seams are butting up against each other. There's just enough of a ridge right here that I can feel them locking into place or nesting. And it makes them easier to sew when they're like that. And it also increases the likelihood that when I open it up, all of my points are going to land in the right spot. So I've ironed all of these ones going out, all of these ones going in, and the next step now is to sew them together into the blocks. I've sewn all of my blocks together and I've brought them back over to my ironing board to get them pressed before I square them up. And I wanted to show you how I've chosen to press them. These ones are still yet to be done. This one I finished. I'm very pleased with how my points have lined up. And I have enough space here for when I sew these blocks together that I shouldn't bury these points in the seam, fingers crossed. What I've chosen to do on the back is twirling or fanning the seams. The center points here, where all of this fabric comes together, was quite thick, and it made a very big bump when I went to press it. So what I've done is I've opened it up to allow me to press it flat, and then the seams, one's going one way and one's going the other. To do that, you take a block, and there's my block there. And I'm looking at where my line of fabric comes into my seam allowance, and I'm just going to trim just to my stitching line. Don't cross the stitching line because then your work will unravel. I'll do the same thing on this side. Turn my block over. Now I'm finding the edge of the fabric here, doing the exact same thing. Now when I go to open my block, I'm able to have the center going one way and the outside going another. And this bit in the middle isn't attached to anything. And I'll be able to open it or fan it out to help it lie flat. So what I've chosen to do with the block I've already done is to have all of these center seam allowances pressed towards the center. So let me do that with this one. Come to the front, just using my hand to feel that I'm pressing towards the center. And then I've decided to have these outside edges facing out towards my center blocks. So I will do that as well. Quick little finger press to get it to lie flat. And then pressing with the iron. Same on this side. Now comes the fiddly bit, where I need to try and open these and press them without burning my fingers. Okay, so I've got that one open. I'll get it started with the iron. Work my way down. And open this one. Ooh, ooh, ooh. There we go. Okay. And there you have it. You can see that I have this center seam has been pressed going towards the center of my block. The two on the edges I've pressed going out towards the edge, and the center where all of the fabric met, because of that little trim on the sides, it allowed me to open it and lie it flat. This side I obviously haven't done yet, but if I were to just leave this the way it was and fold it and press it, either this way or that way, I end up with a bulk here. There's just far too much fabric in that spot. There is absolutely nothing stopping me from ironing it like that, but I will never be able to get it this flat. You can even see a ridge here. And I know obviously you can't feel it in the camera, but there's a substantial lump in these 2 points. Whereas on this side, it's flat enough that you almost can't tell. And all of this is just to help when I get to the quilting process. You want your blocks as flat as possible, so that way you don't have any pulls or tucks or puckers. You don't want the needle to bounce off of anything when you're quilting. So I'm going to continue this process with the rest of my blocks and then see what's next in the instructions. There is block number 3 all finished. I have 5 of these with my flying geese on the edges, and then just some simple squares to fill out the rest of the block. So I will have these labeled and into the bag until the next time that I need them. The next set of instructions says that I need to find strip set C from the previous week, which is these longer ones, and they want them cross cut. Strip set C, it's that one. That one's A. Go. Okay, cross cut this one, and then I'm setting it aside again until I need it for next time. Just take the tape off so I don't get distracted with what I'm doing. Alright, let's get my starting edge nice and straight. And they want 6 of them. Okay. 4, 5, and time for another week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'll get a label on these as well. Get them back into the bag with the rest of my project. And then wait until next week to see what the next round of instructions are going to be. If you have enjoyed watching me create this week's block with my flying geese, I'm very proud of these ones, and you'd like to see other videos that I'm creating, you know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification. Bye.